Welcome to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified, your companion for exploring the fascinating world of law.
That's right.
Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's absolutely crucial for all of you future legal eagles in India.
Yeah.
The powers of the President of India.
It's a role that often sparks a lot of debate.
It does.
Is the president really just a figurehead, or do they actually wield some real power behind the scenes? We're going to unpack all of that today.
That's exactly what we're going to do.
Right.
And to guide our deep dive, we've got some really fascinating sources lined up.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at excerpts from legal texts,
Okay.
insights from a government portal,
Cool.
and even a study material document from an online education platform.
A diverse mix.
It is.
Which should give us a really comprehensive view.
Absolutely.
All right.
Now, to kick things off, I came across this really thought-provoking quote from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar,
Okay.
the principal architect of the Indian Constitution. He stated that under the draft Constitution, the president occupies the same position as the king under the English Constitution. He's the head of the state, but not of the executive. He represents the nation, but does not rule the nation.
I love how he draws a parallel with the British monarchy right off the bat.
Yeah.
It really kind of sets the stage for understanding the limitations on the president's power. Unlike a king,
Right.
the president doesn't have absolute authority.
It's a good reality check.
Yeah.
You see the president, this esteemed figure,
Right.
but their authority is actually carefully defined and limited
Exactly.
by the Constitution.
And that's where the debate comes in.
Right.
Some experts would argue that the president's role is largely ceremonial,
Right.
like a rubber stamp,
Oh,
just approving the government's decisions.
yeah.
But I think that view oversimplifies the complexity of the position.
I think so, too.
Okay,
So let's delve into the specifics then.
let's do it.
One of our sources, this document titled Pasted Text, it lays out the president's powers in three categories.
Okay.
Legislative, judicial, and military.
A classic framework.
It is.
It really helps us break down the president's role systematically.
Exactly.
Shall we start with the legislative powers?
Let's do it.
Okay.
What struck me from the pasted text document is the sheer range of legislative actions the president can take.
Oh, wow.
Summoning and dissolving parliament,
Okay.
giving assent to bills, and even promulgating ordinances when parliament's not in session.
It's quite a bit of influence over the lawmaking process.
It is.
Imagine being the one to sign a bill into law,
Right.
knowing that it will impact the lives of millions.
It's a huge responsibility.
It is.
But it's important to remember, as this
Yeah.
document emphasizes, that the president generally exercises these powers based on the advice of the Council of Ministers led by the Prime Minister.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's a collaborative system, not a dictatorship. The president works within the framework of the government.
Right.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the judicial powers.
Right?
The pasted text document highlights the president's authority to grant pardons,
Oh, wow.
which is especially significant in death penalty cases.
Think about the weight of that decision.
I know.
It's literally a matter of life and death,
Yep.
and it goes beyond just pardons.
Right.
The president also appoints judges to the Supreme Court and high courts, shaping the very structure of our judicial system.
That's a point I think many law students might overlook,
Yeah.
the president's long-term impact on the judicial landscape through these appointments.
Absolutely.
It's a subtle but powerful influence,
It is.
shaping the interpretation of law for years to come.
For years to come.
Finally, we have the military powers.
All right.
The president, as pasted text states, is the supreme commander of the armed forces.
Supreme Commander.
That sounds incredibly powerful, but
There's a catch, right?
exactly.
I was going to say,
While holding this prestigious title,
okay.
the document clarifies that the actual control and command of the military lies with the Union Council of Ministers.
So it's a crucial distinction.
It is.
In reality,
Yes.
it's the prime minister and the cabinet who are making those decisions
Right.
regarding military action.
So again, we see this theme of shared power.
Absolutely.
It's not the president alone calling the shots,
Precisely.
right?
And it really highlights those checks and balances built into the Indian government.
Yes, and this balance of power is a key theme
It is.
we're seeing emerge.
We are.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh.
We haven't even touched on the president's discretionary powers, where things get really interesting.
Oh, that's where we see the potential for the president to exert their individual influence within the boundaries of the Constitution?
Before we get there,
Okay.
let's explore how the president's role intersects with that of the prime minister.
Yes.
Because understanding that dynamic
It is crucial.
is crucial to grasping how power truly functions within the Indian government.
Absolutely.
So we need to understand the power play
We do.
between these two key figures.
We do. And luckily for us, you found a fantastic resource to help us do just that.
Let's dive into that next.
All right, so we've established that the president's powers are significant,
Yeah.
but often exercised in collaboration with the prime minister and the council of ministers.
It's like a complex dance, right?
It is.
Trying to understand who leads and who follows.
Exactly. And this dance gets particularly fascinating
Yeah.
when we look at those discretionary powers.
Okay.
But before we jump into those gray areas, I think it's important to understand
Yeah,
the broader context of the relationship between the president and the prime minister.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how can we unpack that dynamic?
Well, one of our sources,
Okay.
an article from an online legal resource,
Okay.
provides a really helpful comparison of the president's and prime minister's roles.
Okay.
It even uses a table to break down the key differences.
Tables.
Yeah.
Always a lifesaver for visual learners like me.
Always good.
What jumps out at you from that comparison?
The stark contrast in their election processes.
Okay.
The president is elected by an electoral college
Yeah.
consisting of elected members of parliament and state assemblies.
Whereas the prime minister's election is essentially decided by the party that wins a majority of seats in the Lok Sabha, right?
You got it.
Okay.
And that difference in selection methods really reflects the distinct mandates they hold.
Mm-hmm.
The president representing the nation as a whole is chosen through a broader, more representative process.
So there's a greater emphasis on national consensus when choosing the president.
Exactly.
But what about accountability?
Yeah.
How are these two powerful figures held in check?
Good question. Impeachment is a crucial mechanism for holding the president accountable.
Okay.
They can be removed from office for violating the Constitution.
And that requires a 2/3 majority vote in both houses of parliament.
That's a high bar. It really underscores the gravity of removing a president.
Yeah.
But in contrast, the prime minister doesn't face a formal impeachment process.
Okay.
Their accountability is tied more directly to the Lok Sabha.
Meaning they could be removed through a vote of no confidence,
Right.
potentially leading to the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers.
Precisely.
Okay.
It creates a very different power dynamic
It does.
compared to the president's more independent position.
This table also mentions constitutional immunities.
Yeah,
The president enjoys immunity from criminal proceedings during their term, right?
that's right. They can't be arrested or prosecuted for actions taken while in office.
Okay.
However, they
Yeah.
can be held accountable for actions taken before becoming president.
Interesting. Does the prime minister have similar immunities?
They do, but
Okay.
it's more specific.
Okay.
The prime minister, along with the council of ministers, has immunity from legal proceedings related to advice given to the president.
Okay.
It's meant to protect the government's decision-making process.
So both positions have safeguards, but they differ in scope.
Yeah.
Now, this comparison raises a big question for me.
Okay.
Who really holds the reins of power in the Indian government? The president as the head of state, or the prime minister who controls the day-to-day functioning of the government?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's a topic of ongoing debate.
Yeah.
Some would argue that the prime minister, with their control over the executive branch and the support of the Lok Sabha, wields more real power.
It does seem like they're more in the thick of things, making decisions on a daily basis.
Right?
But I'm also thinking back to the president's power
Yeah.
to appoint judges,
Mm-hmm.
grant pardons,
Right.
and potentially even dissolve the Lok Sabha.
Yeah.
Those are significant powers.
You're right to highlight those. They shouldn't
Yeah.
be underestimated.
Yeah.
And we haven't even discussed those discretionary powers yet, which
Yeah.
can shift this balance even further.
Before we dive into those,
Yeah.
there's one more area we need to cover.
All right.
The president's role in the country's finances.
Ah, yes. Another critical aspect of their power.
It is.
Let's turn to one of our sources.
Okay.
A document from a government portal titled The Position of the President, Relation with Council of Ministers.
From my reading, it seems like the president has quite a bit of influence
Yeah,
when it comes to the budget.
they do.
Okay.
This document highlights that no financial bill can be introduced in Parliament without the president's recommendation.
So the president gets to weigh in on any proposed spending or taxation.
Exactly.
Wow.
They have a crucial role in shaping the government's financial agenda.
Okay.
And that's not all.
Oh, there's more.
The president is also responsible for presenting the annual financial statement, also known as the union budget,
Yes.
before Parliament.
That's a pretty public display of their financial power.
It is.
They're the ones officially unveiling the government's spending plan to the nation.
Exactly. And this role gives them considerable sway over taxation and expenditure proposals.
So just like with their judicial and legislative powers,
Right.
the president's financial influence is significant, even if it's often exercised in consultation with the prime minister and the council of ministers.
Precisely. It paints a picture of a position that's far more than just ceremonial.
Okay. I'm eager to delve into those discretionary powers now.
Okay.
Let's see where the president can truly flex their independent muscles.
Let's unpack those intriguing gray areas where the lines of power get a little blurry.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We've seen how the president's powers extend across legislative, judicial, and even financial matters.
And we've also seen how those powers are often exercised in collaboration with the prime minister and the council of ministers.
Exactly. But now it's time to explore
Okay.
those intriguing gray areas where the president can act more independently, those discretionary powers.
Right. These are the areas where the president's individual judgment and interpretation of the Constitution come into play. They aren't bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers in these situations.
Our trusty pasted text document highlights 3 key areas where these discretionary powers kick in. So let's break those down.
Let's do it.
The first, and perhaps the most significant, is the appointment of the prime minister.
Right.
This power comes into play when no single party secures a clear majority in the Lok Sabha after an election.
Those hung parliament scenarios, as they're called.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how this seemingly procedural matter
It is.
suddenly becomes this high-stakes political drama.
Absolutely.
The president has to assess which party or coalition has the best chance of forming a stable government.
Right.
They consider alliances,
Okay.
potential support from other parties, and the overall political landscape.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act,
It is.
navigating political complexities and potential controversies.
And the president's decision can have a profound impact on the direction of the country.
Of course.
It really sets the stage for the next government's agenda and policies.
Okay, what's the second area where the president's discretion comes into play?
The dissolution of the Lok Sabha.
Okay.
While this is typically done on the advice of the prime minister, the president technically holds the authority to dissolve the lower house of parliament.
So in theory, the president could go against the prime minister's wishes and dissolve the Lok Sabha.
Theoretically, yes.
Wow.
But you can imagine such a decision would be extremely rare.
It would have to be.
It would likely trigger a constitutional crisis.
Right.
And would only be taken under extraordinary circumstances.
I can see why that's not a power they wield lightly.
Yeah.
It's almost like a nuclear option.
Exactly. And it underscores that delicate balance of power within our democracy.
All right, what's the third area
Okay.
where the president's discretion is key?
Refusal of assent to a bill. While the president typically gives assent to bills passed by Parliament, they do have the power to withhold their approval.
Okay.
This is especially relevant if they believe a bill violates the Constitution.
So the president acts as a final safeguard, protecting the Constitution
Yes.
from potentially unconstitutional laws.
Precisely. It's a critical check on the legislative process.
Okay.
It ensures that even if Parliament passes a bill, it can't become law
Right.
if it contradicts the fundamental principles enshrined in our Constitution.
These discretionary powers really add another dimension
They do.
to the president's role.
For sure.
It shows that they're not just a symbolic figurehead.
Right.
They can make crucial decisions that impact the course of the nation.
Absolutely. It highlights that balance between ceremonial duties and real influence that defines the Indian presidency.
Now, before we wrap up,
Okay.
we need to address one more significant power of the president.
Right.
The role in imposing president's rule in the states.
Yes. A power derived from Article 356 of the Constitution.
Exactly.
This allows the president, under certain circumstances, to take direct control of a state's administration.
One of our sources, a study material document from that online education platform,
Okay.
delves into this topic in detail.
It's a complex power
It
with a
is.
lot of nuances.
Yeah.
What are some of the circumstances that might trigger president's rule, according to this document?
The primary trigger is a breakdown of constitutional machinery in a state.
Okay.
This could involve various scenarios, like a failure of the state government to function according to the Constitution, a loss of majority support in the state assembly,
Right.
or even a serious threat to law and order.
And what happens when president's rule is imposed? What are the implications for the state?
Essentially, the elected state government is suspended, and the state comes under the direct control of the central government. The governor of the state, who is appointed by the president, takes over the administration.
It's a significant intervention.
It is. In a state's autonomy.
Yes.
Understandably, this power has been the subject of much debate.
I would imagine so.
And even controversy over the years.
Absolutely. There have been concerns about the potential for misuse,
right,
with the central government using it to dismiss state governments controlled by opposition parties.
And thankfully, the judiciary has played a role in curbing potential abuses.
That's good.
The landmark case of S.R. Bomai v. Union of India in 1994 established stricter guidelines for imposing president's rule.
So the Supreme Court stepped in to protect the federal structure and ensure that president's rule is used as a last resort only in exceptional situations.
It's a testament to the checks and balances within our system. Even exceptional powers are subject to judicial scrutiny.
This deep dive into the powers of the President of India has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground, from legislative and judicial powers to those intriguing discretionary powers.
We did.
And even the complexities of president's rule. We've seen how the president's role is far more nuanced than it might appear at first glance.
For sure.
It's a delicate balance of ceremonial duties and real influence, all exercised within the framework of the Constitution.
And for all of you law students out there, I think this deep dive has given you a solid foundation for understanding the multifaceted role of the president in our democracy.
Absolutely. It's a position that touches upon so many aspects of Indian law and governance. And as you continue your legal studies, I encourage you to keep exploring these nuances and complexities.
Thank you for listening to LexTalks. Follow, subscribe, and stay notified to never miss an episode.